Hi, and welcome to Auxano Bytes podcast. Today's guest is Nitin Vishwas. Nitin is co-founder of Pune-based craft beverage company called Moonshine, an engineer and management graduate from ISB. He has worked at McKinsey and Abbott across India and Southeast Asia in sectors like pharma, high-tech, manufacturing, and FMCG. Nitin, along with Rohan Rehani, co-founded Moonshine. Moonshine makes an alco-bev category called Mead. Mead rhymes with need is a gluten-free beverage created by fermenting honey. For our listeners, mead is a 8,000 to 9,000 year old beverage across all ancient civilizations around the world. While most don't know about meads, it often gets the middle child treatment in a trio of alcoholic beverages, with beer being the star athlete and wine a musical prodigy, even though it has a royal history. More on the same will be discussed during the podcast with Nathan. A royal craft beverage of the history, they are on the mission to bring back the elixir of the gods, as they like to call it, to our palates with a fresh variety of meats. Welcome, Nitin.
Thanks a ton for having me here, Archit. Thank you.
Sure. A fun fact to start with: Auxano Bytes podcast turns 18 with this episode, and we are going to talk about the product present in alco-bev space. So, to begin with, tell us what Moonshine does and also share the meaning behind its name.
What Moonshine does. So we make an alcoholic beverage by fermenting honey. And the beverage that we get is called mead. Mead comes from the Latin word medu, which comes from the Sanskrit word madhu. So the words madhira, madhushala have the prefixed word of mud in them, which is essentially the oldest alcohol, therefore known to human civilization. You'll see mead across every culture. The Romans would call it, Romans I think called it ambrosia. The Greeks called it the drink of the gods. And there is mentions of mead in the Chinese civilization. You'll see it in the Egyptian civilization, practically every civilization in time. And as agriculture sort of kicked in, it became easier to ferment barley and grape and it industrially make alcohol. And that is where mead sort of started going from the drink of the masses to the drink of the classes. And post that, with the advent of distillation, slowly and steadily, we found mead sort of completely disappearing from the annals of human history. So what we are trying to do is bring that product back into the modern age in a modern avatar, and we've named our brand Moonshine. The word actually Moonshine means illicit corn liquor. It used to be made in the Prohibition era in America, and generally made under a full moon night. And the word moonshine sort of stuck from then. And when we started making meads, a lot of people would ask us whether we are making moonshine, or rather they would go blind if they had it. But nobody knew about meads. In fact, the Indian government also none of the Indian states recognized mead as a category. So when we started to do it, when we got asked questions saying, are you making tharra or are you making moonshine? We kept saying no till we one fine day thought the word really was nice, and why not just adopt that word and turn that into a brand? And that's exactly what we've done.
Great. So you talked about Indian government did not know what the mead is, and you also talk about the history that it started to lose its name. So tell us your journey of identifying this craft beverage, and what are the white spaces in this market that you have observed, which this craft could cater to.
So the white spaces in this market are, as of now, we look at mead as one of the largest white spaces, but within the Indian context, you'll actually see agave, which is now being explored. Tequila, unfortunately, has a GI associated with it, so it has to originate from that province, from that region of Mexico. But you see a lot of folks playing with agave. I think the major amount of white spaces in this market are largely around the Indian, so to say, the subcontinent, alcohol, local alcohol. If you go down to Ladakh, you see Chang. Unfortunately, the Britishers nicknamed everything that we make in India locally, much before they came, as arak. And unfortunately, that got designated as country liquor, and nobody really talks about it. But if you get into the tribal belts of India, get into the interiors of villages in India, you'll see alcohol being made out of rice. You'll see alcohol being made out of whatever is locally grown there. And it's something that's been around. I think mahua is another classic example. It's an absolutely gorgeous liquid that you get that the tribal folks make it towards the north of Maharashtra, a bit of Chhattisgarh, and a bit of Jharkhand. it requires a lot more push from the local governments to bring these alcohols up, because these are local to our subcontinent, Mead being one of them. So it's nice to see Maharashtra sort of taking the front row on this journey, and they've come up with a new category called indigenous alcohol, and trying to get a lot of these which got buried by during the colonial past. The British stopped and did not prevent people from making these. And now I think it's time for us to sort of reclaim that history. And it's nice to see a lot of these white spaces now getting filled. Desmond G has come up with a mahua-based alcohol, and we hope to see more of such plans.
So there is localized alcohol available. It's talked about in Ladakh, Chhattisgarh, right? In the same way, I think even for the mead, that's what you are trying to do. Like you are bringing the mead, which is again an innovation that India has not seen. It is in the past, right? So we're trying to bring that. So tell us how and when did you guys think that now it is time to commercialize this craft in India?
It was more luck by chance. I wish there was a more thought out methodical approach. We started making mead for fun, and we had friends who came back for the product. We used to give it away to friends, and friends would typically not support your hobby for more than once or twice, or patronize you once or twice. But what we realized was these guys coming back to us and saying, "Hey, you're making a really nice liquid. If you ever make it again, we love it." And it reached that stage where Rohan and I sort of took a step back and said, "Okay, this seems to be going in some direction. Is there a way we can walk up to, let's say, a excise office and find out what's really required to get this new category created?" I mean, first we didn't know there was no category. So when we went down to the excise offices, then we realized there was no category, and that took us on a journey of 2-3 years. But I think the fundamental point that we realized that there is potential in the liquid is when we saw people coming back, and the questions that we would ask is, "Why are you having mead?" And most of the time the answer was, it's just an easy drinking liquid, and since it's made with honey, there's a nice residual sweetness to it. And when you really think about what people around the world, and including in India, drink, you'll notice that making a liquid a little sweet is almost characteristic of anything, right? If you look at cocktails today, all cocktails are sweeter. In fact, they're sweeter than what we make our meads. If you notice any of the spirits, including your whiskey and your rums, they all have it with Coke or with dilute the bitterness down with water or soda. So we realized that keeping it effervescent, so carbonated and a little bit of sweetness, most liquids are being consumed that way. It's just that nobody positions it that way. So why not we have a liquid which is easy to drink. It is indigenous to the subcontinent, and it's tasty. So why not just try and bring that into the market?
This brings to again the second question that we talked about, that in Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh and Ladakh, you said that there were home grown liquor, so it sort of was considered to be illicit, right? So in the same way, when you thought that fine mead is something that our country has not seen, don't you think that the same question would come up, that this would be also considered as, let's say, illicit, or it would lose its way? And what do you think that this home Indian indigenous drinks got, they never got traction for that matter?
So we were, I mean, see, like I said, I didn't quit my job. Rohan didn't quit his job to go and start this upfront, right? So we just started afresh. We literally had our day jobs when we walked up to excise and said, "Can we do it?" Now, excise could have very easily blown us off, but they were nice. They said, "You know what, this is interesting. How do you make it?" They inquired. And when they realized that it looks very similar to the wine policy, they guided us as to how we can go about it and actually make this a category. So if you really think about it, it's thanks to those guys that we actually ended up doing it, because they didn't blow us off the first time we spoke to them. So I think in a different world, if we had gone up to the excise and excise had said no, we probably won't be having this conversation, because we both don't come from we don't come from any political backgrounds, right? So alcohol typically in India is considered to be a little, I mean, for the lack of a better word, dirty, and most people try and stay away from it. And that was advice we got from our families as well. But we just felt that there may be a story here. So when the first conversation led to very little resistance, saying, "Why don't you put in an application and see where this goes?" we realized that if we nudge it hard enough, this might just come through. I think so. A dash of naivety and a little bit of brevity is what really led to the birth of Moonshine.
And what about this, the Indian indigenous liquor not getting sort of the traction, and again the foreign liquors they have dominated the market. So what is the reason if you moonshine?
It's just old laws. Yeah, we have laws that have not been changed for a very very long time. I mean, Bombay Prohibition Act is I think 1963 or 69. 1949, and then the Beer and Wine Act came up in 1965. Minor changes are made. Alcohol in India is fraught with political landmines, so people try and not disrupt the boat too much, and that's maybe one of the reasons why none of these things ever came up. I think it's only in the recent past we got brands that are willing to push the envelope when it comes to product. It required a Desmond G to actually discover that he could harvest the agave that was growing, the cactus fencing that was growing around Goa, to discover that that could be used to make agave drink. I mean, tequila, the Indian sort of version of tequila. So it's come down to a lot of young entrepreneurs or passionate entrepreneurs who want to try and push the envelope of what's doable, and then what then follows is regulatory changes, and then I think the proof of the pudding is when you get more people trying to enter the same market. So it's I think in the recent past we're seeing a lot more traction, but till now nobody really wanted to talk about it. So that's probably the only reason.
Got it. Now, in category creating business like this, conveying the message of what brand is all about is very important. Tell us, how did you ideate and strategize the branding part of Moonshine?
So the branding side of Moonshine and the category creation of Moonshine, I'll segregate the two, right? For the branding side of it, we actually started with a very minimalistic branding when we started. It was just an M and a M. The reason we did that was we said, if we used Beer Cafe as an example, saying if somebody walks into Beer Cafe and sees 10 brands, we need to sort of still stand out. And we felt having a solid color, just a single color, very, very Scandinavian in its approach, minimalistic in its approach. So big M and a small M is all that we had in Moonshine Mead. And we believed that would raise enough for curiosity for someone to pick it up. But we soon realized that it's not the story, because one, our TG also was wrong. We had assumed our TG is all 28 and above folks who have already traveled abroad, come back in and have reached a certain degree of maturity when it comes to design aesthetics, and they're looking for that kind of slightly older design aesthetics. What we realized that our TG was much younger, it's 21 to 28. And that is around the time when we decided we will rebrand completely. And the philosophy we wanted to adopt is, since we are doing craft meads, where the liquid can keep changing, can keep modifying all the time, depending on and also since we don't use flavors and we use all real ingredients, we also realize that the liquid is always a little different from the batch to batch, because when the season changes, the honey changes, and the honey changes, the mead will change. And therefore, because there was this variability inside, we decided to have the same kind of concept sort of show up on the label. So what we did was we got a little white circle, which is essentially the brand of Moonshine. And around the white circle, what we have is different artists from around the country who put in their sort of rendition of what the brand is. Now, what that allowed us to do was two things. One, when you see us now on a shelf, we pop. We have a lot more color. We're a lot younger. And every label looks different, yet there is a certain element that's the same thing. So for that, it's also reflective of the liquid that we make. So while meads are very different, there's a certain element that remains the same. That's about it being made out of honey. So that sort of story stuck well. Second, we wanted to have art inside, which is the liquid that we make. We also wanted art outside. And we therefore wanted artists to talk about the product. So now by having an artist make the liquid, the artist spoke about the product and helped create a little buzz around in his or her circle. So that's the story around the branding. About the category creation, though, is a very different story, because we are in a sector that does not allow any sort of ATL marketing, right? There's no above the line marketing at all. It's all below the line. And we can't do online ads, we can't do print ads, and we cannot do sponsored posts. And therefore, we can't sell online. So we realized, so for us, the category creation story has been largely around doing events in bars and restaurants and festivals. We do a mead tour, and we use our whatever little social media that we can do to talk about what we are making inside. What we realized is the brand should feel less like a brand and more a human. And we try and show our brand in all its follies and all the coolness that we do. We show things that most alcohol beverages companies will not do, which is show the manufacturing process. So we'll show people sitting and chopping guavas in the factory. We'll show the honey being offloaded. So we want the audience to become one with the brand, and we use newsletters and Instagram to sort of pull out that story and showcase it. And then we expand down that by doing festivals and restaurant events where we bring the same sort of culture there. So you'll see fruits being kept there. You'll see honey being the sort of hero ingredient in all these places. We do honey tastings rather than doing mead tastings before. So if you come for a 1 hour meadery tour, we probably spend about 35 minutes just on honey, because we realize that we have to differentiate ourselves from a beer. We have to differentiate ourselves from a wine. And honey is the reason why we are different. So we focus a lot on our raw material. And then we've also put out something called the Moonshine Honey Project, which also further showcases our honey, because we realized very few, or rather no alcohol brand can put its raw material out and have consumers come and taste it and judge it for themselves. And so we have the Moonshine Honey Project, where we, through our own boxes of about 400 in number, we source our own honey and then we package it. So it's absolutely pure, it's clean, but it's a nice way to sort of explain to people what we do and where we are from.
Got it. So you talked about the ATL and BTL being non-existent in your category. So again,
BTL is there. This is all BTL.
Yeah, I mean, still it's difficult to
It's
do
difficult.
it.
Very difficult.
So again, marketing in alco-bev space has evolved till surrogate methods. Let's put it that word. Then what are the other avenues? Already you mentioned, but what are the other avenues Moonshine has explored in the line with the generational culture in the India?
See, at the end of the day, there are certain things that haven't changed. While I know the generational culture has changed, the fact that our labels are so different from one from the other, and the fact that the liquid is so different to taste, what we've realized is for a youngster, this works beautifully, because they're used to seeing a bird changing color or a monkey changing color from SKU to XKU, but they've not seen an entire label come to go complete change. And that's something that we are trying to do with our liquid. And that sort of vibes with the audience around, because that's something that resonates with them. They're able to understand that, this is a very different thing from what their folks back home were drinking. And nobody in today's generation wants to drink what their fathers and mothers are drinking. So we sort of cut across that bit of the story very easily. But what hasn't changed in the alco-bev space is the only way to get your liquid to be picked up in retail is to sample a lot of it in on-premise or restaurants and bars. So, and we call that LOL, right? Liquid on lips. Getting more and more people to try a product, doing wet sampling, it drives retail sales. And that's sort of a thing that hasn't changed for the last 50 years, not just in India, globally. So there are certain things that work. So you just hit hard on it. So a sizable bit of our marketing expenses are actually sent in sampling. We try and find as many avenues as we can in a bar or a restaurant to open the bottle, because we always believe that marketing happens in two phases. The first phase is about you discovering the product and picking up the bottle and opening it. The second part of the marketing, which is driving repeat sales, is you tasting the liquid. So we need to ensure that the liquid is great. So production team is also doing marketing for us. So they take care of making a good liquid, and then we try and ensure that we open as many bottles as we can. We typically see a conversion of 1 in 3, 1 in 4. Most of the time, people come back home for a meal. And so we know the more we sample, the more we are able to drive retail sales.
So what exactly do people come for? Like what do they ask for when they go to bars? That, what I want that drink which I had before earlier.
No, they remember Moonshine. So what happens is, see, I'll tell you how it works. So we'll have a little 10 card that says ask for Moonshine. And if somebody calls and says, heck yeah, you end up bringing out a bottle and opening it. When somebody comes in and opens the bottle and tries it, invariably today's generation puts it on Instagram or puts it on Snapchat and tags their friends. Now the friends will come back to the same restaurant and ask for it. But what we're essentially driving is recall of a brand. No alco-bev company makes money in on-premise, that is restaurants. Most of them make money in off-premise. So for us, it is, and nobody goes out drinking every day. So we know that someone who comes out drinking will try and experiment with a new product, but the next weekend when they're drinking, they most probably are going to be drinking at home. And therefore, it's important that we're available within a 2-3 kilometer radius of the bar that they tasted the product in. And being available in retail drives margins. It also drives sales. So then somebody goes to the shop and they pick it up. Now, in the shop, there are two kinds of shops. We have the counter shops and the walk-in shops. Now, if it is a walk-in shop, even if somebody hasn't tried moonshine, just because our labels pop so beautifully, people come and pick it up because you're allowed to go touch, feel, and lift the product. If it's a counter store, that's where brand recall matters, and they'll actually say, "Wo mead dena, ya wo moonshine dena," which is we hope that's what drives the sales. So for that, we either ensure we train the shopkeepers or we ensure the product is in visual range. So for us, this is the only sort of 4-5 points that we need to keep ticking and going in circles, because the more we do this, the more it's going to end up driving top line.
Got it. So you talked about your TG. You found out that TG is pretty young, and you talked also about the stickers that you outsource to all the artists and tell them that whatever you have in mind, just put it according to the brand. So who decides in the in-house team that what this is great for this particular SKU? How does
It's
it
a
work?
completely democratic process. Thankfully, we have a team that is also under 27. Most of them, I think Rohan and I, and one or two of us outside of Rohan and I are older. Most of the team is below 27. What we try and do is we have like a very standard process. As soon as we start getting entries, we let's say we contract the project with an artist, or we do crowdsourcing basis the inputs that we get. It's a team that sits together. We look at multiple parameters. One of the parameter is we put a dummy label that has come on a bottle and keep it at about 6 to 8 feet distance. From a 6 to 8 feet distance, the bottle has to pop, which is essentially what's critical. So you need to use a lot of primary colors to make it stand out. So for example, outside of moonshine, if you look at Bira, right, they've got red, black, and they've got white. Now you think of these three colors in a dark bar, these three colors immediately pop up. And that's very critical of the kind of label that you use. So for us, these little checks, so we have a little checklist and all of us give scores on it. We see whichever score is coming to, whatever is coming to the final number, whichever is the highest score is what then gets taken to the next stage. So none of us have weighted scores, are all flat. There's nothing called weighted scores. So everybody gets, it's a democratic process. I might not like it, somebody else, but everybody else might like it. So then it is what everybody else decides. But that's pretty much the way the process runs, right? We have our own internal checklist as to, having done it for last 4-5 years, we have a sense of what works, what doesn't. So we put it into that little filter. And if it passes the filter, it goes to the next one.
Got it. So, we talked about how this moonshine name popped up and how did you find this craft beverage? What was the strategy to enter in the India? And we also discussed about how this marketing branding activity, especially in the category creator business, started. So now let's talk about the conversations. Like, what were the conversations like when Moonshine approached investors? What were your key takeaways in terms of their viewpoints towards the industry, and how did it fit with the consumer needs side story that you guys had discovered with Moonshine?
I think there were two things. For us, the consumer need gap was, I think the one that works very well with most investors is we ask the investor if what's the first alcohol they drank. Or if they're older than me or as old as me, invariably the first beverage that they had was a beer, or it's a dark rum. Most of the time it's beer or dark rum. Now, then you ask the next question, did you like it? And 99 out of 100 will say no. Then we asked, why do you continue drinking it? Because our friend said we should, because our palates will get acquainted. And then we asked the question, why should it be that? Why should alcohol be an acquired taste? When you made your transition from a soda, from a Pepsi Cola, sort of, the cola world or a fruit juices world to alcohol, why was the transition so difficult? And nobody has an answer to that. And that is essentially the answer that Moonshine is sort of trying to solve for, where we're saying beverages can be tasty even if they have alcohol in them. And that is exactly the principles that we stand for. So that pretty much eases out the initial bit of the conversation. I think the one place where most VCs or most investors are worried about is unit economics. We are in an industry that needs healthy unit economics to survive. I think most industries need it, but more so in our case, growth is not, you're not making a rocket, you're making a really fast car. So it's very important to ensure that the VC who's putting the money in, or rather giving us the fuel, is not giving you aviation fuel, but is giving you high octane regular fuel. So I think the question that we ask everybody is, don't expect us to go like 100x overnight. We're not a .com company, we're not a tech company. And therefore, those investors who understand it right at the beginning focus a lot of time on unit economics. And for us, that is something that we've been very focused on, is ensuring that the unit economics has a high GC. There is a lot of sampling that needs to get done. Taxes in every state are different. So these are smaller things that we need to look at as compared to any other startup that the investors has looked at in the past. So if the investor is asking us these questions, we already know the investor understands the business somewhat. And it's in our best interest to sort of explain and plug all the little gaps so that they can take an informed decision. So there is unit economics and there's liquid. So we approach both the problems depending on what the investor is asking, but we ensure we cover both of them over the course of a pitch.
So I think in previous one of the answers we discussed about how there was not much innovation done in the alco-bev industry. So I mean, any particular reason that you have found that why people are having acquired taste, right? They want more, but they don't know that they want something else.
Yeah.
So if there was a need, then how did nobody from the supply side tried to create an innovation in this particular?
It's not true that they didn't try. I think every product has a time which is function of the world that you're living in, right? More and more people have been traveling abroad. More and more people have been seeing what is abroad before they come back to India. The world is becoming smaller. So if something gets launched in America tomorrow, it's very easy for us sitting in India to figure out what's happening there. There was a time when that was not possible. Secondly, innovations have happened. I mean, some of us are aware of this, but there was a brand called Indus Pride. It had come up in the late 90s, early 2000s. They had spice-based beers. What exactly is one of the, it's a style of beer right now. You get orange peels and cloves on your palate. It was already launched then. Unfortunately, nobody liked it then because palates hadn't been exposed to that in the past. And that exposure comes from traveling. That exposure comes with internet, with tech and technology coming on your phone. You suddenly start seeing, understanding what others are doing around, and then you're a lot more open to trying something new. And that little shift that has happened is why now if you launch the same product, it's going to do well. Unfortunately, Indus Pride did not survive beyond, I think, 5 years. It had to shut. I mean, they realized that there is no market for it, at least not yet. Indian audiences were not mature enough to start discovering an alternative beer. But then when Bira came back in, when Bira started in 2014, I think, or 12, 13, suddenly the Indian audience had already changed. People had traveled abroad. Imports had started to really go up. So I think what Ankur probably noticed was the more imported beers started to do well in India. He started to realize that there is a market for better beers. And that is why he launched Bira. Now, the second Bira came into the market, audiences were more mature to understand that there is a tastier beverage possible. And now him breaking that market gave access to folks like us to also say, hey, we are also another tasty beer. It came, I mean, tasty mead, sorry, I should never call mead a beer, but we are a tasty beverage, right? And but the first person who sort of really got people to sit up and take notice was Bira. And the reason Bira worked and Indus Pride didn't work is essentially a function of timing, and also the branding, how young you make the brand feel, and the audience maturity at that stage. So why seltzers may be not working in India right now is because in the US, seltzers thrives on the fact that it's local. But in India, we still haven't reached the calorie sensitivity that some of the other markets have seen. For us, we don't really worry too much about calories, at least not yet. So maybe as the market again continues to mature, we'll see more sensitivity around calorie. You'll start seeing seltzers doing very well in India as well. So it's all about market sensitivity, how mature the market is to a certain parameter, and then you'll start seeing stuff roll. So I think the reason why nobody tried anything new then was because nobody was looking for anything new. It's now that there are folks who are constantly trying to see what naya kya hai. And that generation is very different.
So, I mean, the key takeaway would be the market maturity and the sensitivities.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in how many geographies moonshine is present, and what are some consumer side statistics, this market sensitivity thing that you have observed, which were unexpected or interesting? In moonshine's research, they came out to be unexpected or interesting.
So we are in 8 markets right now. Karnataka, Maharashtra, Goa, Silvassa, UP, Himachal, Rajasthan, and Assam. These are the markets we are in right now. We frankly never thought we were going to do well in UP. Right? UP was a market we just said, let's just put the product and we'll see what happens. Ironically, after that little Shark Tank thing that happened, there was a large audience sitting in UP that was actually watching that show. And overnight, the phone started to ring. And for I think almost 4 days, it never rang. And I might go on a limb when I say that 15% of the calls that came from UP alone, asking ki ye product milta hai kya? And when we put the product in UP, we still haven't even ventured into Eastern UP. We're still in Western UP, and there's enough demand for the product there. And it was something that we never anticipated. UP was not on our first or the second list when it comes to launch, and we ended up pumping it up to beyond first. I mean, this is literally phase 1, and we've also entered UP, and we're doing reasonably well in UP. I know another friend who's launched in a can again. UP was his first market before he opened Maharashtra, and he's based in Pune, right? So a lot of us have started to, like I said, India has become a lot smaller with the advent of technology. I come from a tier 2 city. I come from Mysore, and what I have seen is when we were there, we were waiting for a coffee shop to come in. I mean, talking about the late 90s, and there was no coffee shop, and we would drive all the way down 100 kilometers to a town on the highway of Mysore, Bangalore, to go and have a cup of coffee in Coffee Day. Right? That aspirational crowd now is every little city of India. And it's foolhardy to think that all your audiences are only sitting in the metros. So I think that little discovery that even in the smaller towns, people are looking for a nicer drink to have, and they're not really there for you don't have to give them the second tier treatment, is something that we've learned and we're very happy about, because the amount of depth we're getting in a state like UP is insane. And we see this sort of replicating now over the period of time in multiple states in India. And
yeah. So, I mean, the category is ripe for the disruption. As you rightly mentioned, that the world has become, India has become much smaller. So, category is ripe for disruption. So, what does moonshine look to itself in creating this journey and becoming the market leader, from category creator to, let's say, market leader? Like, what is that one thing that you think that would surely reach moonshine at that level?
Are you asking for what would be the external change that might help accelerate our growth?
No, the internal.
Internal, I think we just need to increase our width of distribution. I think if you're asking me where's the one place where we still struggle is getting WOD, and from the way we see it, choosing the right channel partners is becoming very, very important. So initial channel partners are people that we got along with and we went ahead and did business with. But I think over the course of time, we've started to realize it's important to strategically now choose these channel partners, so that overnight the width of distribution can literally explode, and that will allow more people who know about your brand to explore it. And more importantly, it also gives you a better return on investment on the marketing you're doing, because at the end of the day, the awareness into availability is what drives sales, right? So awareness is happening. Availability is something we are struggling with. So I think over the course of the next year or two, you'll see us hopefully being available in neighborhood shops. And more importantly, we will start doing exports, because we have started to realize that the liquid has an international appeal as well. And that is something that we will be focusing very strongly on, starting the first 2-3 countries in the next 30 odd days. And over the course of the next 18 months, we hope to be in about 5 countries, consistently sending out stocks. I think consistency is important, not just being available once. And that is something that we will be driving.
So, how many SKUs does the moonshine have? In all the geographies, you have all the multiple SKUs?
No. So moonshine, we love to declare that our home is always going to be Maharashtra and Karnataka and Goa, this little belt, this 3 states. This is where the hub is, right? And you will always find a lot of stuff in this 3 hub. And this is again something that we're trying to change. Abroad, this concept is very strong. So if you're from Houston, Shiner Box your beer. Every variant of Shiner Box is going to be available in Houston, and you'll find variations of it around. So there's a regional connect that we want people to have. IPL did that. Now you're affiliated to Bangalore, you're affiliated to Chennai, right? So we're trying to build that affiliation in the West, and Bangalore, Karnataka, Maharashtra, and Goa. So that little belt is where we want to build our strongest affiliation. But you will see, and this is where you'll find most of our SKUs. Number of SKUs is hard to say. We've made over 15 SKUs, but we have usually 3 available at all points in time: the apple mead, the coffee mead, and the traditional mead. And then we have one seasonal flavor sort of coming in and going. So at any point in time, probably 4 to 5 would be in a market. But in all other markets, you'll see at least 2 or 3 at any point in time. You'll never get the entire 5. If you want all the 5, come home to one of these 3 states and you'll find the whole lot. So it's our way of sort of also making folks in these 3 states feel like Moonshine is their home brand. It helps build that sort of appeal. So that is something that we're trying to do. But in every other state, you'll find at least 2 or 3 SKUs.
Okay. But just out of the conventional book of marketing, having more SKUs, doesn't this distort the focus also?
Yeah, completely. So the way our distribution of these 5 SKUs matters. In, let's say, home turf, right? Maharashtra as our home turf. The way the distribution of these SKUs is 85% is just the one that is available all through the year. The 15% is actually a marketing hook and less of a sales hook. So the way we drive it is we push for artificial scarcity with these SKUs. So let's say kokum season is on, we'll do a salted kokum during the summer, and we will, even when it's selling well, we will stop selling it after June, July. Even if you look for it in only a few shops where it still possibly moves slower, you'll find us there. But in most other places, you will not find it, and you will not find it till the next year. What that essentially tends to do is it tends to drive sales in our existing SKUs. That's your apple coffee traditional, because people are coming in and asking, "Naya kya hai? Acha wo de de. Acha wo nahi mil raha hai. Let me just pick up what is there." What essentially it happens is the salted kokum will act like a hook to pull you to the store, pick it up, but also pick the other 3 up. And you will see the other 3 everywhere. You'll see the small batches in only a few places. So this little game of artificial scarcity helps drive the brand's pull, helps generate a lot of brand pull. And that is something that a lot of people said will not work, but it's working beautifully for us.
Great. So I think the entire game is on the liquid, the main ingredient which Moonshine thrives on, apart from obviously the marketing and branding effort. So tell us something, how this liquid is formed in the factory and what exactly went right from the start till today.
So it's actually a very simple process. We take honey. The honey comes from either a US FDA approved supplier up in North, or it comes from smaller beekeepers in Maharashtra, in Karnataka, in Goa, in Tamil Nadu, in Northeast. So we sort of source our honey from all over the country. This honey comes into the meadery. We consume about anywhere between 7 to 8, 9 tons of honey a month. We dilute the honey with water, and then we hit it with a white wine or a champagne yeast. As the honey ferments, it turns into alcohol, and that alcohol is then once the alcohol is ready, we get fruits from the mandi or from a cooperative. It's chopped up in the factory, and then in a muslin bag we let it in, and we let the flavors of the fruit or the spice sort of seep through the mead. Filter it, bottle it, label it, and it's out. So the overall process takes us anywhere between 8 to 14 days, depending on the kind of product you're making. And that's as simply put as that. It's a relatively easy liquid to make. It's just that maintaining a certain degree of quality is where the challenge comes, because we don't use artificial flavors. So which is where the all natural element to it, while it's a great marketing story, it's a real pain to ensure that it's relatively more consistent. And managing quality and managing the product is where all our challenges are. So it's essentially, this is the simplest thing. It takes about 10 to 14 days to make.
But what about the journey of you and Rohan I mean, both of you, I'm pretty sure you must have not known how to ferment the
Also,
mead.
Reddit, plug for Reddit. It's a great platform. We used Reddit to first make our
Mm,
first make the batch for the first time we made the batch, that is.
mm,
And over the course of time, I think Reddit also, we sort of explored Reddit enough to now start doing it on our own. We imported technical books from America, studied those, understood how to make mead. But the real test is when you start making it, because a lot of smaller things change as you scale, and you need to factor a lot more things in. Like, for example, efficiencies were as low as 60%. How do you bump those efficiencies up to 90% is something that only practical knowledge and lots of experimentation will do. So we have a team of postgraduate degree holders in fermentation technology at the factory. So with them, primarily Rohan looks after production. So
mm.
I think it's a combination of that team that we've been documenting stuff, regressing data to find out how parameters change. So that's how we reduce the production time from 40 days to make a batch to like 10, 12 days. It's all tweaking different factors. There's no data around anywhere in the world on this. So it required us to sort of everything from first principles. And we're still learning. Every day we're learning, because this information is not there. It's not available anywhere. So it's for us to generate data, analyze the data, refine the process, generate the data, analyze the data, refine the process. And that's like an ongoing thing that we do.
Got it. So it's more of a trial and error that has been
Lots of
taken
trial and error.
in the last 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, at any given point of time in this last 6 years, did you and Rohan ever thought of, maybe this would not work? Let's move ahead.
Very,
Something
very
sort of.
often. I'll be like, if I never thought it will not going to work. There have been days, yeah. I think that is what entrepreneurship is, right? Anybody who's journeyed into this space in the last 75 years of Indian independence has gone through that. Is this going to work? So we go through our ups, we go through our downs. The ups are much higher than the downs. But I think the product market fit took the longest for us to figure out. While we thought we got the product right at the beginning, a lot of the product had to be constantly tweaked for at least the first 18-24 months. And during that phase is where we were most in doubt. Now we're quite confident that the product is on point. Now it's about getting the distribution and marketing. So, but yeah, you go through your phases saying, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that's like a never ending story.
So what was that eureka moment of, yes, Moonshine has achieved the product market fit? Any particular instance that you could think of?
I won't say that we got the product market fit. I'll take a step back and say when we felt that the liquid was almost there. I think it was, I think the first weekend of putting it in Bombay and selling it in Bombay. I was the sales rep inside the liquor store, selling it to people the first weekend. And then following weekend, that's the second weekend, I was again in the same shop in Powai trying to sell it to customers. And one customer came in with a photograph of the bottle on her phone saying, somebody in my family bought this last week. I had it, was great. I want to know whether you still have this. And when I saw the bottle, I realized that was our first SKU. So I remember stepping out of the shop, going down, calling Rohan and saying, I have a blind audience who's actually liked it and come back for the product. Repeat sale happened for the first time. And that for me is the first time we felt validation, saying we're at least 85-90% there. Product market fit needs a little more push, but I think we're on the right track.
Got it. Great. So I think the all marketing and the sales, I mean, you were the sales rep, so you actually stood there and in the shop, you told them that I would be selling this drink. Great. So that would have been a great feeling for sure.
Yeah.
So last question of the session. Please tell us one unfiltered piece of advice that you have received in your career, which has changed your perspective or has given you direction which you never thought of.
There is nothing that you may break that can't be fixed, unless there is an ethical element to the whole thing. If you've been ethically clean, everything that you break can get fixed, and that's something that we tell everybody in the team as well. That don't worry about it. I mean, we are doing a lot of firsts in this country, and therefore there will be lots of mistakes, lots of things that we'll break along the way. What Rohan and I did in the first probably 18 odd months when there was no one else in the team, to the stage where we are in now, where we have like a large teams working with us in building Moonshine. That's the only sort of advice we'll tell is test it, trial it out. There's nothing that can be broken, that can't be fixed. So as long as you stay within the ethical boundaries of what's right and wrong, I think that's the one mantra that we keep telling people. That's something I was told to by my boss when I joined Abbott for the first time. So something that I stick to.
Got it. Well, this brings to end of our today's podcast. The conversation took us right through the different phases of creating a consumer-focused product in an evolving market like India. We thank you, Nitin, for taking time out to share the insights on building the category creator business. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Archit. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.